Hi guys, welcome to the video, welcome to Stansted, and welcome to this beastie here. This is the Take Command Torquesim Citationjet 525, released about 3 weeks ago, and it's what we're going to have a look at in today's video. And in the traditional style, we'll have a look at the outside, the inside, take it for a flight, see what we think. Now, it's going to be a relatively detailed review because it's a fairly high fidelity aircraft, and we need to give it the justice it deserves. But what we'll do is run through a few bits first. Now, what I would ask is if you do enjoy the video, please don't forget to tick like, share, subscribe, particularly subscribing. It really helps me with the analytics of the channel to see if what I'm doing is what you guys would like to see. And it just helps me out, and it's hugely appreciated beyond words what I can express here. But anyway, let's get on with the actual video. So, let's just bring this over because I like to have a quick look at things before we get airborne, just to get a flavour of things. So, as I say, it's the Take Command Torquesim Citationjet 525, also known, I believe, as the Citation, because it's not a particularly fast jet. It's relatively straight wing. It's not got a lot of sweep on the wings, so it's quite limited by the aerodynamic capacities of the wing, really, more than anything. But anyway, it's available through the X-Aviation website, and the first talking point is the price at a mere $85. So here's the thing, price is an arbitrary figure. Price is something that is not on its own a defining factor. What you need to look at is the quality of the product, and does it match the price that you're being asked to pay for it. And a spoiler alert, I really like this product. I think it's very good, and from a piloting perspective, I think there's a lot to it that makes it fun, interesting and challenging all at the same time. So yeah, I really rate the product, but at the end of the video we'll have that discussion again, and you guys can see what you think as to the price. As I say, it's certainly not the cheapest add-on that's out there, but price doesn't necessarily it's not the overwhelming factor if you then start looking at quality of a product, which is something we will discuss as we go through. So, the web page itself doesn't really have that much detail. It goes into the description and the reviews. There's only 4 or 5 reviews. That's really just a snapshot for me. So, yeah, they're good reviews, but if I'm honest, I would expect a sales page to have good reviews on it. But there we go. That's just a personal preference. So, crafted with extreme precision, well, we will assess that as we go through the flight, see what we think. The full experience, I mean, there's a lot of sales speak, basically, in these pages. There is a lot of information as well hidden within the sales speak, but when you get to Take Command Series, Hallmark, Realism and Passion, these words don't really mean a lot to me, if I'm brutally honest. What we want to see is what the actual thing does. Deep dive into the completeness and beauty of the Citationjet 525 systems from the meticulously, there's a lot of stuff in here. Insane attention to detail. There is a lot of detail. I will grant them that. Refined flight model. I do like the flight model, and immersive soundscapes. I do like the sounds. Now, Torquesim have got a number of videos on the website. I would suggest, if you're interested further to this, have a look. But obviously, these are, dare I say it, not impartial. They're more there to demonstrate their product. And as with anything in real life, people will demonstrate their product but not necessarily highlight the weaknesses, which is the purpose of reviews. To be fair and impartial to the developer, but also the customer. Torquesim have a blog. This gives you much more detail about some of the elements of the product and what they've been doing in terms of the product. If you're interested, that's worth a read. I'll leave a link in the description. Likewise, if you want more manuals, so the aircraft comes, let's actually pull the manuals over. That's the easiest way to do it, isn't it? The aircraft comes with 3 manuals that are readily accessible in the aircraft folders. The Torquesim Citationjet, let's get rid of that, and let's enlarge it. Manuals are an important thing for me because, particularly with an aircraft that you're not familiar with, if you've flown an Airbus, you've flown an Airbus. You know, they're all going to be pretty much the same. The only differences you're going to have are things like in terms of how you load it, the electronic flight bag, etc. When you get to GA aircraft, there's a lot of variety in the aircraft, a lot of variety in the developers, and particularly when it's a high fidelity aircraft, it's worth reading the manual. Now, I have mixed thoughts on the manuals here. Very shiny, very nice to look at, and they do contain a lot of detail, but there's a few bits in this manual that I think would improve it, shall we say. However, very well presented. Torquesim have done a nice job with the manuals, but you'll see here we've got a lot of stuff in terms of a lot of pictures, and you know, these pictures are really just showing things off more than anything else, and we get a few pages in before we start to see anything that's telling us any information. So we're on page 8 before it's telling us any information, and even then it's telling us about chocks, covers, etc., and all the various bits. Now, it's very well presented, it's very well done, but in effect all we're doing still is talking about the static elements. So there's certain bits that for me I wasn't aware of until I'd read this or gone through this properly, such as if you disconnect the battery then you can't turn things on, etc. But this is mainly more a map, a layout of where things are, and a few bits and bobs about it. So as you can see, realistically, one of the things that's missing here for me is handling notes. Now, you can get handling notes, and I'll show you where to get those in a bit, but this is really all about the systems, and then at the very end we've got a normal procedures checklist. So well presented, very nicely done. I love the instrumentation. I'll discuss that when we're in the cockpit, but I absolutely love the instrumentation of the period that this thing's from. It's that kind of changeover between EFIS and steam gauges, which for me is a fascinating period of time. It's when developers of engines and aircraft were just coming around to the idea of using more and more electronical systems. Really nice. You've also got the normal procedures in a slightly more expanded format, and then you've got some standard takeoff performance data in here, and cruise, climb, etc. There's not a huge amount of information in these tables, however they are really useful. So for the depth that a flight sim pilot, an average flight sim pilot, goes into, these are more than adequate for me. And we'll also have a look at the help that's available in the cockpit. The UNS1 handbook, so it has a flight management system, the UNS1. Now, the UNS1, this development model of it is actually developed by a third party, I believe, so it's not restricted to this aircraft. Amy Parent, who's done an amazing job. So this isn't developed outright by Torquesim, and I can demonstrate this coming up to here. At present, doesn't support LPV approaches, so you can only fly RNAV approaches, LNAV and VNAV. Now, the element is down here. Some aircraft have autopilots capable of coupling to those, blah blah blah. Other aircraft cannot fly coupled VNAV with the autopilot. In that case, approaches can be flown using a combination of LNAV and vertical speed modes. So basically what this is by default, this system is capable of that, but the aircraft itself was never capable of doing a coupled VNAV approach. So this is one of the things where it's a third-party developer who's developed this. They've done an exceptional job in my opinion. So if I go back up to where the nav page stuff is in terms of stuff that you can do, cross tracks, for example, you can do offsets, heading intercepts, all sorts of stuff in this. Pseudo VORs, if you want to place pseudo VORs to muck around with that, really good. So this is actually a really useful and a really good tool in terms of the aviation. You do need to have a look in terms of linked and unlinked flight plans, which can easily be something that you get into an unlinked phase. And you need to be aware of how to get back into a linked flight plan if you are going off just the normal take off at A, land at B, follow the magenta line between. But how it functions with the aircraft is subtly different to, say, a fully integrated one where you might get it with the Airbus, for example. So this in effect keeps drawing lines onto the adds lines onto the EFIS, and yeah, it's a fascinating system, but it's also the system that's on the Dash 8 Q400. So if you've used the FlyJSim Dash 8 Q400, there's a very similar representation of this. In fact, I don't know if it's the same one or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is the same one. But as I say, from a developer's perspective, this makes absolute sense. If someone's already created something that is really good and works in your aircraft, brilliant. Right, I'll come on to this one. This is the performance manual, which gives you a lot more information about the performance, adverse weather, etc. So if you wanted to go into greater depth than the little tab, and I'll show you that as I say, you've got it here available to you. Now, this is not one of the normal documents that is in the folder, so you need to be aware where to find this. And if you go to the Torquesim web page and you go onto the page, you go down to manuals, you'll find it comes up with this web page. The user manual we've mentioned, normal procedures, handbook, but then there's a fourth document, the full performance manual. I would suggest if you're flying this aircraft, spend the time to log on to the website, which is this one here, xpilot.com. It's free, but log on and then you can download your full version of that, which is really useful if you want to go into that level of depth. So there we go, that's all the websites, that's all the documentation that we need to worry about at this point. I have set up a flight. The flight is going to be going from Stansted to Southampton. It's not a very long flight coming out here. We're going to be doing a straight in approach at Southampton as opposed to an LNAV approach. So we're not going to be doing an LNAV approach, we'll just do a straight in approach. It's only going up to flight level 60, and as I say, although it says 55 minutes for the flight time, wherever it is, actually it's a much shorter period of time airborne than that. So as I say, once we've gone through the SID, we haven't got long to set ourselves up for our approach and landing, which we will talk about during the flight. So let me pop that to one side, and then we can have a look at the aircraft. So it's never good to start out with an apology, and I will start out with an apology because my camera work is always awful in X-Plane, and I really don't know why. It's just one of those things, I guess. But just parking, what I will say is this thing has persistent modelling, so every time you close down the aircraft it will be exactly the same state when you open it up, and if you turn it off with the battery still on, you will start to find that your battery power is diminished. Now, something that I only became aware of by reading the manual is the following. If you come up here, you've got the option to load certain pages, and the main menu has obviously all these things. We haven't got the windscreen cover on, but that's fine. You've got a choice of avionics, you've got a choice of transponder codes that you load in as default, charge the main battery if it's low, and then refill the oxygen should you need to do so. We're only going to 6,000 feet, so I'm not worried about oxygen or pressurization today. However, obviously this is a living, breathing thing as a result. The thing that's not on here, which I find quite odd, is the APU, and it does have an APU, and I didn't realise it had one because it wasn't on here until I read the manuals. So the lesson of the story is, or the moral of the story is, read the manuals. As I said, there's a lot of information in there, well laid out, and there's some little nuggets that you need to pick up as you go. While we're here, we'll have a look at the rest of this then. Obviously just in the main menu. Weight and balance is super simple. We'll have to use that to set up the flight. Tail number, with some of the liveries you can have personalised tail number, so you can change the tail number. I absolutely adore this livery, so unfortunately this livery you can't change the tail number, but then obviously if it's a real world livery you wouldn't really want to do that anyway, but you can personalise that if you wished. Performance, there's only 2 tables, we'll be able to see those as we fly. Pop-ups are a really important thing for me, particularly with GA aircraft, less so with airliners, but particularly GA aircraft, and you can have a number of pop-ups that, as the name says, pop up. We can have a look at that in the aircraft, but Which one was it? That one. Because in the aircraft you can pop them up by clicking the screens as well. But there's one that I find I use all the time that I just leave up. Systems, electrical system, we will have a look at it. Obviously we're all turned off. We've got a good battery voltage at the moment. But this system, for me, this could be done better. We will have a look at this. And then the final menu choice is the UNS1, where you can make a couple of configuration alterations. So, for example, setting it to pounds, because this aircraft, pretty much everything works in pounds. We haven't got kilos in this. So yeah, pretty straightforward. What we'll do now is we'll have a look at the outside, see what we think. So obviously we've got all the static things. Now, one of the things I would say is that, for example, Microsoft Flight Simulator, you can pull a couple of static bits off, but they've done it really badly. They've done it with things that you wouldn't be able to reach in real life. They've done it in such a way that, you know, the ground crew would have taken it away already. The walk around feels to me a bit more realistic. The only thing it's missing is the ability to wiggle things. But for example, the cones, you can click to get rid of the cones. Nice noises, nice sounds. We can click to get rid of this somehow. I can't remember how. It's up here, is it? Where's the click spot gone? There it is. Again, lovely sounds. And then we can kind of do a walk around, which we will do. So we need to get rid of the wheel chocks, get rid of the pitot cover, check the condition of the aircraft from this position, make sure it's all clean, and look at things like the undercarriage, which we'll look at in more detail. Get rid of that, get rid of the one over here, come around here, get rid of these chocks, walk around, get rid of the engine covers. And if you don't get rid of these covers, you'll find that you will have issues with airspeed, etc. So you do need to remove them, which is nice. Engine covers, and then finally these chocks. And you'll find that that's pretty much everything. But it's nice. I like the sounds. I like the way they've done it. Okay. So now let's have a look at 3D modelling, etc. I don't own any other Torquesim products, so this is the first one I've looked at, and I'm really, really impressed. I think it's a beautiful little rendition of a wonderful little bizjet. Very low to the ground. It's caused me a few issues to start with in terms of figuring out the round out height for landing. Still a little bit all over the place with that, but the 3D modelling on this thing is really, really well done. Absolutely beautiful. And things like the appendages, really nicely done. A lot of detail gone in here for things like the pitot tubes, etc. And areas that are difficult to model with the curves, complex curves where things match in, really nicely done. There's depth to the panels where you can see lips on the panels. Edge of the door is nicely done. These panels, for example, stand slightly proud. Very, very nice, or appear to stand slightly proud. Very, very nice indeed. And just looking at the PBR textures and the 3D textures, 3D modelling, very, very nice. Coming down to the gear, again, really nice level of modelling detail. Beautiful. Just enough dirt to show that it's a working aircraft, but obviously bizjets get lots of TLC generally. If we come down here a little bit, we'll have a look at the undercarriage. And as you can see, the level of attention to detail in this 3D modelling. I mean, if you look at how difficult it's been for me just to get down to this position, that gives you an indication of the level of detail of the modelling. Very, very nice. Superb stuff. Really, really impressed with that. And then again, around the windows, things like the windows, the curves, etc. Beautifully done with our hero pilots here. Absolutely great with the PBR textures, etc. Things like the doors are interactive from the outside. Ooh, didn't want to do that quickly. I can never get the camera action right on the X-plane. But you can open the door. That's locking it. There's my unlock. There we go. And open the door, and then get the stairs down. Beautiful animations, absolutely lovely animations for the whole thing. Very nicely done. With the chain down there. What does it look like with the chain when it's folding? Oh, and it's even got momentum to the chain. That is a thing of beauty, that is. If you don't close the door properly, it does affect the pressurization. And as I say, the 3D modelling, as you look around, it is superb. Very, very high. The only single thing I've been able to pick up is just down here, just inboard of the rumble strips. Down here, this slight straight lining here at this junction. But other than that, it's brilliant. Absolutely superb. Lovely sheen to the PBR for the cowling, for the air intake. And at the moment, because I've got the control locks in, have I? No, I haven't got the control locks in. That's a gotcha. But look at I've got a Thrustmaster Warthog joystick, which is just on the base it's on, allows it to wiggle a bit, and you can see how smooth the deflection of the controls is, how accurate it is. These are not thrust reversers, they're thrust attenuators. They flip out 90 degrees and they stop thrust that's going backwards. So they're not technically a thrust reverser. I don't believe they'll provide you with any reverse thrust. But it's a pretty dinky jet, so it can stop fairly sharpish. But these really do help for short field stuff. And as I say, this livery, I absolutely love it. I don't know if you can open that door. No, you can't. The emergency door, you can't open that. But overall, I mean, looking at the modelling, vortex generators up here, the shine, the level of detail, even to a little bit of blurring around the textures, but we are looking super close at this thing. But if you look at the static wicks, even the static wicks have been modelled in 3D, so they've spent a lot of time looking at the details of this aircraft and how to model it, and the hinge points for everything. Really, really super nice. Super nice. So there's a few things that are also interactive around the aircraft as you look at them. So this is, I believe this is the hydraulics reservoir. So you can check your hydraulics. I'm not sure if you can fill it up or do anything with it. No. But you can do it. You walk around, look at the hydraulics reservoir, and then zoom back out, and then coming around this side there's a couple more bits to look at. So this is one of the rear baggage bay, but also in here you've got the battery, and if I do that, take the battery off, if I then jump inside and turn the battery on, nothing, absolutely dead as a doornail, which I think is a lovely feature. Now it's got persistence modelling, which is great. However, I don't know if you left this for say a week or a month, if you had before you flew it, the battery would run down. For me that would be an awesome feature if it did, but you know, each one to their own. Not everybody would want that to happen, but for me that sort of husbandry of looking after your aircraft is a significant thing, and I feel it'd be lovely to have it as part of the sim. But we'll reconnect that, otherwise we're not going to be able to demonstrate anything. Now this one down here, that's for the APU. It's very loud when you're outside, but we'll just take that off for the moment. In fact, no, we'll have it on and we'll just go into the cabin. So that's whirring away, absolutely happy as anything. We'll leave that as it is. So that's the exterior. Oh, did you hear it just ramp up with its power? Excellent. Love that. But as I say, let's have a look at the interior now. Interior. Beautiful. That's the word I'm going to use. There is not a lot in here that you can't interact with. Obviously you can't pull the plugs out for the stereos, etc. But virtually everything, apart from just a couple of things. We've got the usual ashtrays. Yeah, great. But pretty much everything is interactive. So this is the gotcha. This is your control lock. You need to make sure that that's off before you take off in the aircraft, but I would suggest leaving it on when it's on the ground and you're not flying. But if you look at the cockpit, it's quite cramped, and it's a period of aviation that I absolutely adore. So when I was trying to get into commercial aviation in my first attempts whilst I was still in the Navy, British Airways was still flying the Boeing 737-200s to show you the time period. They still had that, and what we know as the classics, the 3-400s, were fairly new into service. And the 757 and the 767 had the same sort of setup as this, where they had still some steam gauges, and then they had electrical attitude indicators and navigation setups, almost as if they didn't trust the electric stuff enough that they couldn't necessarily get rid of these. So we've got a lovely mix of instruments, and I say this is probably sort of 80s period, that sort of thing, early to mid 80s I'd have thought for this integration. Now the electronic systems, I absolutely love them. They're pretty similar to the Jetstream 41 that was an absolute favourite of mine in FSX, and I'm desperate for PMDG or somebody else to recreate that Jetstream 41, because that was a fantastic module for FSX. It just needs to be brought through. PMDG, if you're listening to this, that would be fantastic, and I think it would do really well. But the thing with that is it's got character, and this aircraft has character in bucket loads. So let's have a look at the 3D modelling and the texturing, and I have to say from the outset the 3D modelling is very good. There's a lot of areas where a lot of add-on aircraft don't get things like the curves, so this looks legit. It looks really crisp, it looks really nice, and there's no obvious straight lining at this sort of distance. You're looking at a very well modelled 3D cockpit. Love the dirt and grime in here. These things were working, although they did try to keep them clean. Some of the surfaces you'd find in an aircraft, you just can't scrub them. So there's enough wear and tear to make it look believable. And then as you come down to things like the pedals, the animations are lovely. You can see the fine level of control and the fine level of animation and movement. And if I keep my feet still, you'll see that they don't flicker or anything. Wear and tear on things like the control lock, all really good. Sounds very nice. Absolutely love that. And so there's a lot in here that you will need to learn. There's a lot in here that is not unique to this aircraft, but of that period there's a bit of shotgun attitude to putting instruments in various places. So a nice one to have is the angle of attack indicator. Lets you know how close you are to stalling the wing. But again, we'll go into the avionics, because you'll notice up here there's no VNAV. So we don't have VNAV capacity within this aircraft directly. We do have an advisory VNAV via the flight management system, but very busy cockpit. Not necessarily that difficult or complex, but it is a very busy cockpit, and annunciator, carrot salad up here, etc. Obviously the first officer, the co-pilot, however you want to describe it, would get a very different instrument panel, because this is generally something that can be flown single pilot. However, you are very busy. It's one of those aircraft that needs you to kind of, and I'm still developing it in this aircraft, but you need to try and stay ahead of the aircraft, because you can very quickly find yourself struggling to keep up. So, as I say, FMS down here, we'll have a look at that during setting the aircraft up. 3D modelling, though, is really nice. Very crisp, very well done. And then the texturing as well, very nice, appropriate to the aircraft. Circuit breakers all work and are functioning. So if you wanted to play with circuit breakers and have a go at modelling things like that, I don't know what this is down here. Is this alternate static? Beacon reset switch. Yeah, everything pretty much is clickable. I've only found a couple of things that aren't. And actually I can't even remember what they are. Oh, one of them is the radar. The radar's inoperative. Now this is the same as the flight management system. This is something that X-Plane quite often has this, and Microsoft Flight Simulator has it a bit more than it used to be with FSX, for example. But what you'll have is third parties developing things like an FMS, and the developers of the aircraft will go, actually that's a really good true to life system, may I please make use of it in my aircraft. Obviously there's a discussion goes on between the two, but as a consumer we're then very lucky because we've got somebody who's specialised on developing this and we've got somebody who's specialised on developing this. The two combine and you end up with a really nice product. And for me, I think that's where the weather radar is. We're waiting for a third party potentially. It may be Torquesim developing it, it may be somebody else, I don't know, but at the moment it's inoperative. Having said that, it doesn't really make a massive difference in this aircraft. It's not something where we're going to miss out on that. I can't remember what the other thing is that's not clickable. Some of these obviously aren't clickable, but they have absolutely no impact on the functioning of the flight. Yeah, so 3D modelling is beautiful. Textures, as I say, if you go nice and close in, you can see the depth of 3D modelling, the depth of textures around the instruments, lights, lenses, wear and tear. Really, really nice. And what we'll do is we'll bring ourselves round like this, and you can see the relief as we look along the cockpit. Very nice indeed. Looking at areas like this where it's just fantastic. Really nice to see that. There's one over here that I think now I struggle with this. I don't know what I'm doing wrong with this, with the the standby artificial horizon. Really don't know what I'm doing with this. I'm doing something wrong because it's never erect, but there we go. That's just something for me. That's sheer idiocy on my part, I suspect. But what I was going to show you is actually part of this. In fact, no, it's part of this. The co-pilot. Look at the layers of the modelling of the instrumentation here. Really detailed, exceptional 3D modelling. So that's my thoughts on the cockpit. We'll just go and have a look at the back of the aircraft. It's not a place I tend to spend time in, but it looks very comfortable. If I come down here, got drinks cabinet if you want anything for that. Unfortunately the drinks aren't interactive, and I've lost the click spot. There it is. What we will do is we'll shut this up, and things like the entry lights etc are interactive. I always lose track of where I can click the door here. The easy way to do it is to go up to here, main menu, and can I do it on the door? I cannot do it on there. Oh well, that's a shame. Let's see if I can figure it out. That's it. There we go. And then the noise from the APU dies down a little bit. You'll get a warning if you don't do the following. You need to actually lock it. You can hear all the clunks. And then we can have a look around the cabin, and it's a lovely, lovely place to be. So we've got a jump seat here, then into the main part of the cabin. Things like the armrest can be dropped down, and they're click and drag, so they're adjustable as much as you wish. Same with the blinds. All the blinds work and they're completely adjustable. It's not like a binary thing of they're either open or closed. These handrails can come down, as I say. Just a lovely, lovely environment. There's a bit of an anomaly down here which I don't really understand. This might be a me thing. Oh, the vents are adjustable as well. I assume that opens and closes them, yeah. Lights adjustable, and if you want to turn it on you can. Well, there's two anomalies down here. I'll express what they are. The first one is this strange mirrored effect here, which doesn't seem to match the seating arrangements, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. There's no door that I can find to actually close here, so it's a very public situation. So here's the emergency exit, and should you be that way inclined, which I am not that way inclined generally, you can find yourself the loo roll there. There's a spare drawer. The toilet is under the seat. The flush, I believe, works because you can click it, and then you can have a look in that cabinet there. So there's been quite a lot of modelling in a place that I don't genuinely spend any time in when I'm in the sim, but there we go. So sim interior is brilliant in this aircraft. So let's have a look at firing everything up. Now, because we're on APU, we can spend a little bit of time with this rather than rush through. If you're not on APU, you need to be careful because you can run the battery down quite easily. But what we'll do is pop the battery on. Actually, we'll just double check that we haven't left anything in a condition that's going to cause us any grief. So the flight management system turns itself off automatically. That's not an issue, but you need to make sure that your speed brake switches, well, your speed brake switches center, so that's not so much of an issue. We'll just move these out of the way, and you can see down here we've got the thrust attenuator, which is currently in the auto position, I think, or is it in stow? No, it's in stow. I'll be honest, I don't really understand the system logic behind it, because I found it that when I put it back into auto mode, it still sometimes just stays out. I don't understand it, but you can test it, put it into auto mode or stow. I think when it's on auto mode, it won't deploy in the air. But I don't really understand the system. Speed brake is just a little flicky switch. Hold it on, it extends. Hold it off, it goes on. The thing with the speed brake is when you see it on the surface of the wings, it's not very big at all. And then obviously your trim wheel trim indicator, really nicely modelled. Wear and tear down here on the pedals, really nicely modelled. But as I say, the main things, we're not going to kill ourselves and we're not going to destroy the aircraft. So make sure we've got our gear down. We're not going to have a premature retraction of the gear, and then we can have a look at various bits and bobs. Now, because I'm on APU, I can turn the avionics on so that we can have a look at that. Comes up with a lovely Torquesim screen as it loads in, and there we go. Now, talking about the avionics, they're as I say, they're sort of quite mixed and old, but we will mention this bit here. So I believe that when it says GTN XI, it's not the GTN XI, it's the PDS or whichever one it is I've got, but it's not the GTN XI. The GTN XI is the version that has the updatable Navigraph data set. So you buy the enhanced GTN 750 XI, and then you get that. I've got a GTN 750, which is the PMS one, I think it is. No, the Reality XP, that's the one. Doesn't matter which one of these two you load in, it will load in with the GTN 750. But because mine is the Reality XP, which at the moment isn't, to the best of my knowledge, designed for compatibility with this aircraft. It does work, but it's not really designed for compatibility yet. But as I say, the GTN 750 XI is due to be made compatible with it and released. So for me, I tend to flip between either the standard or the GNS 530s. The GNS 530s are the standard default X-plane ones. They're not particularly bad, they're not particularly great, they just are what they are. And I don't know if you can swap them out with the Reality XP ones, if I'm honest. But for today we're going to keep on the standard, just because it's going to be, for me, something where we can muck around with the systems a little bit better. But this is nav 1 and nav 2. So COM1, COM2, nav 1, nav 2. This is ADF. If you have the GNS 530, I believe you lose the ADF. Likewise, the GNS 530 can't do airways, so we're not really losing a great deal by not having that with us. But what we'll do is we'll use the FMS because that's a more complete navigation system. But we will have to revert to nav 1 in order to have vertical guidance for an ILS. So looking at the systems and the organisation of the systems, as I say, we'll leave the avionics as they are, but you can muck around with it. In fact, yeah, we can muck around with them. This is the point where human factors are starting to become a thing. So we've got more organisation, but the problem with this sort of aircraft is you start to run out of panel space. So you can see we've got predominantly the electricals here, but they're mixed in with fuel boost, engine start, igniters, avionics powers up here. Then we've got anti-ice, de-ice panels, but down here we've got the gyro controls immediately next to some of the lights, interior lights, other lights over here. Then we've got this navigation equipment here. So I will mention this before we start to play around. This panel here is not, this is all for your EFIS basically. Your autopilot is this panel here and this panel down here. So there's a mix of stuff around, and this is why for this panel, because of where it is, I tend to set up and leave the following pop-up, the autopilot main panel, and I leave it. You can resize them, move them around. So if you wanted to pop it out, you can. But let's pop that out. I haven't popped it out, have I? Pop-ups. There we go. As I say, you can resize it, make it as big or as small as you can, so obtrusive, unobtrusive, pop it on the other side. You can pop it out for another window, put it on another monitor. It's really good, and I absolutely love these in any aircraft that has pop-ups, because when you're flying this and you're hand flying it or you're in IFR, the last thing you want to be doing is trying to move the camera down here. It doesn't matter whether you do it by keybind or however you want to do it, doesn't matter. But for me, having a pop-up makes so much sense in aircraft like this, so much sense, because the human factors element of how it's laid out is not always that intuitive. So yeah, really good. Pressurization system, we don't really need it today, but you set it with this little dial here. It confused the hell out of me because it's not really described that well, but this sort of 8 or B or whatever it is on the end isn't part of the altitude. I assume that's going to be set to a barometric altitude, so you can change it between flight level and barometric, but we're going to set it to 6,000 feet, although realistically it's not going to be something that's an issue for us at 6,000 feet. But yeah, so really nicely done, and it's of an era that I find it so fascinating. As I say, this electronic flight instrumentation system is fascinating. So these switches down here control the combination of these two, predominantly this lower display, but you've got full map, and it cycles between the 3 modes for nav 1, and if you want nav 2's down here. But we'll have a look at that as well with the flight management system. When you're on this page, this is where you'll see it as legs for a flight management system. You can change the range, so you can see this number down here, 12.5. It just cycles through the numbers and then goes back to 150 all the way down. So we'll set it for 12.5 for the moment. Well, that's 25 in reality, but we'll set it for that. If you want to change the crosshairs up here, or the presentation for crosshairs or the chevron, I prefer the crosshairs, so I'll pop that on there. You can change down here for ground speed and time to go. Elapsed time is there, and then finally these are your 2 nav modes. So these select what you're using as your nav source. So navigation would be nav 1, FMS is obviously FMS, which is this, and your nav 1 will depend on the equipment fit. So if you have the GNS 530s, nav 1 is the left hand GNS 530, etc. So pretty simple, but it's easy when you're behind the curve to start to get to the point where you sat there and you'll set it up on this, or you'll select your autopilot mode on here, but you won't set it up on this as your source. So it can be something that will catch you out if you are not really paying attention, which is significant. And this aircraft, it's not a particularly fast aircraft, but it is something where if you're not paying attention, it can bite. it's a lovely thing. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward in many respects. Starting it is an absolute doddle. I tend to try and get it started on one engine with the GPU now, and then once I've got the GPU, once I've got one engine running, I tend to remove the GPU at that point. But we've got plenty of time to muck around with this at the moment. So first thing I'm going to do, whilst we haven't got anything fired up, I've got my nav stuff on, so I'm just going to power up the flight management system. As I say, UNS1, you'll see it go through its various tests here. Whilst it's doing that, let's have a look at what we're doing. So the routing is really straightforward. As I say, we're going Stansted to Southampton. There is an approach at Southampton. There is an instrument approach at Southampton for runway 20. There isn't one for 02, so we're going straight in for 20. I could have joined via the various routings, but I'm not going to, because I'm just living on the edge of life, just pushing it out there. Let me just get Navigraph up and unload that flight, import from SimBrief. That one there, and we'll have a look at the flight plan via this. So you'll see it's got a departure set up. It does have an arrival. What arrival is this? A Compton 1 Sierra, but we're not actually going to fly that. What we are going to do is choose an approach, which is going to be an ILS to runway 20. So VOR DME from Compton, runway 20, ILS runway 20. We're just going to approach from final, add to route, and what you'll see is it comes up with this thing where it's kind of almost overlapping. So as a result of this, what we're going to do is we're going to just fly to Pepys, and because we're almost going to be in line with the runway, we will just in this point we will just then swap over to follow the beacons in, follow the ILS in. That's the plan. So realistically we don't need this, but I'll just leave it in for reference purposes for this bit so we can see it. As I say, we're just going to play devil's advocate with this, but that's our route. It's pretty straightforward. We're doing the Nugbo 1 Romeo departure, which is pretty fun. As you can see, we're under quite a lot of controlled airspace here. Although we're in controlled airspace, we've got a slice of it, this controlled airspace above us. So there's a constraint in terms of the flying. We're not going to go above 4,000 until Nugbo. Technically, we're in a sim world. We're not going to kill anything or anyone, including ourselves. So we're just going to pretty much ignore that. We'll see if it matches this constraint. Although, to be fair, there's no VNAV, so it will match whatever we set on the system. But what we want to do is make sure that we're above 3,000 by the time we get to this point, and we're going to see how well it flies this departure. Now previously I've had it come and swing out quite far before it comes back to re-intercept, but at the end of the day, as the pilot, that's our prerogative. We need to control that. We'll see how we get on. We will set up a VOR though for Barkway so that we can assess the 156 here, and as I say, the departure basically is pretty much straight ahead to 3.1 on the DME. We do have the FMS, so that's probably going to take charge of that. Hang a right, 8 miles from Barkway. We're then going to go on the inbound 349 towards Barkway, and then we're going to turn left to the outbound of 257 for 5 miles. Pretty straightforward. Altitudes is the southwest is 2,100, so that's not really going to be a massive problem for us, and that's the highest altitude, and that's really all I'm going to worry about. We're not going to go too much in depth with this. We're more interested in the plane. So let's pop that over there where I can see it a little bit better, and then I'll just stupid thing, just trying to make it a little bit bigger in that window, and it plays silly games on my other screen. So as I say, this is our routing. This is what we're going to be having fun with. Ignore the flight number, the tail number, etc. I'm not doing a real world thing here, so I'm not overly concerned about that. This is fired up, our friendly flight management system, so except at this point it's very different to Boeing and Airbus. I do like it though. Flight plan from Echo Golf Sierra Sierra. What we're going to do is go to menu. We're then going to go to the departure, which is off runway 22. Not quite sure whether there's a 22 and a 22 central. There's only a runway 22 that I believe. In fact, although what we can do is just have a look at this. Bring this over. Yeah, so I suspect either that or that would have been a runway. Probably this one here because it's got a doubled runway. So that was probably one runway and that was probably the other. I don't know which one would be classed as 22 central, 22 centre though. Whether it be that one, that one. Although that would imply that all three were runways at some point potentially to have a centre. But I'm just going to select runway 22. It's not going to make a massive difference to this flight. But it's just an anomaly that I've found in this. It's not necessarily in the other sims in the data, but we'll see. So we're just going to choose 22 because, well, why not? It's not really going to make any difference because the LNAV post runway departure is something that's going to be more what we're worried about. So let's collect that, and then we're doing the Nugbo 1 Romeo, which is 5, enter, enter, and that's now in there. So we go to the flight plan, we can see the legs are in there. Let's go to next page. In fact, previous, has it got the height constraints? Yes, it has, above 3,000 then to 4,000. So next page. From Nugbo, we're going to go on the, says he, let's go back over here. Nugbo, we're going to go on the direct to Silver. So Silver, S-I-L-V-A, where's L gone? And quite often, oh, you idiot. Quite often, it's talking and typing or clicking. Is the issue here. Quite often you find that the names of waypoints or intersections, etc., are quite often named after something. Silver in the UK is a well-known, well, it could be one of two things. With its location, it could relate to Silverstone Racetrack. It could also relate to Silver, which is a company that made compasses. But it just fascinates me sometimes with the names of the waypoints. You can tell that you near or associated to something by. So, for example, the Trent Beacon near East Midlands, that's by the River Trent. So the naming conventions are quite odd. So obviously, somebody, whoever, at whatever time, just decides to make that name, and that'll do. So Charlie, Papa, Tango, Compton. No idea why it's called Compton. Accept. And then technically we've got our arrival in, which is the Compton 1 Sierra, but what we're going to do instead is we're just going to put our arrival in. So Echo Golf Sierra Sierra, because it's relatively straight in from that point, and we're not following the height constraints of the arrival, so I don't want to confuse us. Echo Golf Sierra Sierra, enter, accept. And then we'll manually vector ourselves onto that. What we will do at this point is we'll go into menu, we'll go into arrive. We're going to be landing on 22, which is 3. That's not right. We've obviously put the waypoint in wrong, haven't we? So back out of this. Flight plan. Next, never talk and try and do something at the same time. Echo Golf Sierra Sierra, so we want 9, and we want Echo Golf Hotel India. Enter, enter, and then we want to clear that one, so delete that one. Delete, there we go. So that's better. So now if I do menu, arrive, should be much better. Yeah, 0, 1 and 2, 0. We're going to go for 2, 0. To enter the star, we're not going to do a star, so we just click enter again. We're going to do an ILS for 2, 0, which is 3. And we're not going to use a transition. We're not going to use the beacon, so enter. There we go. So that's all in. Flight plan. Now we're going to go to fuel. And at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to call up our weight and balance. This is super simple, dead easy, really like it. Let's go to our flight plan, see what it's got us sticking in. So it's got a block fuel for £2,000. So £2,000, and you'll see this move. So this is our current gross weight. This arrow depicts where it's going to move as you burn fuel. So obviously if this is here, you might end up burning fuel that takes you out of your flight envelope, which is pretty important. Obviously you've got your limitations at the boundaries, and you can overload the aircraft quite comfortably. So I'm going to put 1,000 in each side. Normally you've got far too much fuel in this aircraft. It's a really nice aircraft in terms of what you can do with it, but 1,000 each side. How many packs have we got? Where's that gone? How many packs we got? We've got 6. How many got? So 1, 2, don't want the jump seat, 3, 4, 5, 6. I just put a nominal figure for weighting of 174. Obviously you could put more or less. I think in the real aircraft you have the option that you can basically weigh people on the scales if you're taking people, but we're not going to worry too much about that. The cargo is 360. Ooh, that's a lot. We'll have to see how we get on with this now. So let's say, let's put 100 in the front and 260. Now I would like it if they could just have something where we could just click, and that would change the click in and we could manually type the numbers, but it doesn't seem that we can do that. Well within our envelope, so that's absolutely fine. So we'll leave it at that. Quite happy with that, and that should give us, according to SimBrief, it should give us an estimated all-up weight of 9160. What have we got here? We've got, well, we're high here, so yeah, it's not quite matching. Yeah, so it's assuming that the 6 people are £1,000. Which is not too far off, but obviously we can just fly with these figures. We don't necessarily need to copy what's on SimBrief as long as we get the fuel. So transferring this into this now. Packs, we've got 6 packs. 6 packs. Enter. The weight of the 6 packs, we'll just leave that for the moment. The cargo is, what did we say, 260 did we say? 360 wasn't it? 360. Enter. The zero fuel weight, it works out as that. The gross weight and the fuel on board, we said the fuel on board is 2,000. You can separate it down into the various sections, but I'm not going to bother. Enter. That gives us that gross weight. Let's just double check what we've got here, 9967. So I'm going to take that as the figures in line with that. So I'm comfortable. We're not going to get too excited about it. As I say, you can go through the various other pages, which is all very similar to the Dash 8 Q400 because it uses the same flight and management system. But obviously that can make better use of the VNAV in as much as it can do a coupled VNAV. This particular aircraft can't do a coupled VNAV. It is what it is. It is purely advisory. We'll see what opportunities we've got to use it, but as you can see, the first constraint in the descent at the moment, it's got as a centre fix for 20 at 2459, which seems a bit odd. Let's have a look on the chart. 2459. Yeah, it's going to be 2000, isn't it? What's that altitude? Oh, 1800 for the platform altitude. That's quite low. Yeah, so the final fix. So it's got the centre fix much higher than the final fix, but yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We'll work it out. We can cope with this stuff. But that's a really low altitude for your final fix, 1800 feet at only 5 miles out. So that will be a good fun. We'll have a bit of a play with that. So let's get this thing started, get it airborne, see what we think. So, as I say, let's just have a look at the carrot salad, make sure there's nothing untoward here. All looks good. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to flick random switches now. This isn't necessarily following the checklist. As I say, the checklists are quite nice and detailed. just making sure there's nothing that looks untoward before we start messing around with the switches. So coming down here, we've got the fuel boost pumps. I'm going to turn those both to on, just so we've got the fuel. Ignition's going to go on for both. Little green lights come on, and then largely that's it. So we're going to make sure we've got the nav lights on to tell people we're in the aircraft, put the beacon on, and we're going to press for the right hand one, and it starts really quickly. I do not know if this is the correct timing for how fast these engines start, but it does not take long. We left our fuel on, didn't we? So it's going all the way up. You silly bugger. Okay, well that's all good fun. Nice good start. I'm going to just pop the ignition back to normal for the moment. We're going to pop the right generator on. DC voltage is risen. We didn't do this test, which you can go through all the tests. Stick shaker. That'd be interesting. Does it actually shake the stick? Hey, what a fantastic feature. Simple things, please, simple minds. That one's spare. Sorry, angle of attack. Spare. Windscreen temperature. Overspeed. Anti-skid. And then finally testing all of the annunciator panel and then off. Nice, like it. So the voltages, if I go to left hand generator, dead, battery's fine. It should match the right hand generator because at the end of the day the buzz bars are now linked. If I now go up here and go to the systems, I'm hoping that they come up with more systems than just the electrical systems, although it's worth bearing in mind that this aircraft doesn't have hydraulic controls from what I can figure out. But you can see up here we've got the various buzz bars powered. We've got the left hand generators dead. You'll notice the difference here at the moment because we're not on the starter. The start switch contacts are open. Got the battery, it should be charging again after it's yeah, there we go. So it's charging after it starts. It's what's called a starter generator, these things. So the starter and the generator are the same thing. So it uses the starter to start, obviously, but when you flick the switch over, it will become a generator and it will disconnect the starter. Really clever systems, but you'll tend to find that in aircraft like this, because you don't have an APU providing air for a start, they'll tend to use something like a starter generator. But you can see that this is fired up, it's doing everything it should be doing. The crossfeed is closed at the moment, powering everything on the left hand side as well. Hot battery bus, everything is looking as we would expect. So what we'll do is we will now start the left hand engine and see what happens with that. So fuel is on, left generator, we'll make sure it's off and reset, and then we're going to start the engine, and you can see the starter's connected there. This is more like it. We haven't got fuel in, at least we haven't destroyed the engine. Gets up to about 20, put the fuel in, and the starter has cut out now, but we haven't connected our generator yet. Make sure it's a good stable start, come down here, and then when we connect the generator we should see this close, and it does, and then you get the figures for the generator. Right, so here's one of my things that I would have loved, is I would have loved to have seen some sort of colour coding on this, so that you would have seen green, you know, it's got power, red, it's got no power, etc. That just, for me, would have made this a little better, but yeah, it's quite good. I wonder if we can, is there anything that's obvious that we could pull as a circuit breaker? Not really that I can see off the top of my head. You'd have to have a real dig, but there we go. So that's all very good. Let's turn the ignition back to normal for the moment, and everything is pretty good. So we're going to start doing some things. We're going to put the anti-ice bleed air on low for the windscreen to heat the windscreen up. Pitot static on. Not going to need any other de-icing at the minute. Coming down here, I tend to always just crack lights on, just so that if we go under a particularly dark cloud, for example, we're okay. windshield bleed air just to heat that windshield. Gyros off, flight safety, passengers going on. Landing light, we'll put it to taxi, anti-skids on. Coming up here, you can now see we've got our LNAV flight path in. Clear that. We're going to need to set our altitude. We're going to set it just straight to 6,000. We're not going to muck around. In fact, we'll set it to 4,000, see if it levels. Oh, you buffoon. I'm going to leave this as the barrow as 1013 because I'm going to be lazy. But our altitude is set via this down here. Here's your altitude. We're going to bring it all the way down to 4,000. We'll see how it does with that to start with. And then working our way around, what we can do, I'll demonstrate this. In terms of the modes here, you can see we've got heading, blah, blah, blah. What we can do is we can just click down here. This little button here is your toga. Doesn't affect the engines. There's no link with the engines. There's no auto throttle. You have to do it all manually, which is absolutely fantastic. But what toga does is it puts it into heading hold and a go around mode, which basically puts these bars into a position where you follow the bars to climb out. That would be the normal takeoff mode for this aircraft. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to click nav, and we're just going to leave it at that for the moment, and then just get rid of that. So at the moment I'm actually going to follow nav. I'm not going to do the go around for the takeoff, but that's technically what you should do. This, as I say, there's nothing really I can interact with that I can see that I can change. There's no real. If I do this, it changes the height of the bar, but it doesn't really seem to affect the actual. It's probably in the instructions, the bit that I haven't really paid attention to, but we'll exercise it through its full range of motion, see if that has any impact. But I don't think it's going to. And we'll pull to cage it, hold it, put it in. Yeah. Don't know what's going on with that. Let's just have a look, make sure there's no fuses sticking out, no circuit breakers. Nothing untoward, no. Very odd. Very odd indeed. Engine instruments all out here look really good. And then, so I just want to check that the attenuators are stowed, although it's on auto. So let's just go and have a look at that. Now they're out. Look. Great sounds as we move around, but they're out, so I'm going to stow them for takeoff. And in fact, whilst I think about it, I also need to disconnect the APU, because otherwise we're going to drag that into sky with us, and that's not great. Which there's no obvious indication in here that you're on APU, which is an interesting thing. That's a bit of a gotcha that could catch you out. Should you end up doing that. And thrust attenuators, we're just going to stow those. In fact, yeah, stow them. Hear a clunk whilst they're stowed. The last thing I want is those out. And then if you are so inclined, if you come over here, you've got an announcement panel where you could make announcements if you wish. So welcome, English briefing, safety takeoff.
As we prepare for takeoff, please ensure that your seatbelt is securely fastened.
How cool is that?
All electronic devices should be set to airplane mode or turned
So
off.
some of the panels are click, move, drag, resize, click to get rid of it. And I think that's particularly useful, so that when you're doing an ILS, for example, you haven't got miniature displays down here. It's something that I really like with this aircraft and with all the aircraft that have click out, pop out things. But we're pretty good to go. We just need to know our numbers. So coming up here, performance, takeoff performance. I don't know if there's a click spot for this somewhere. There may be. But just reviewing the numbers, we're looking at 14 degrees outside, altitude 340, the weight 9930, which is what we expect, 15 degrees flap. 96.8 is our N1, looking for 104 for V1 rotate 105 and V2 108. What I will say is that at these speeds we will pass through these relatively quickly, and then factors for headwind in terms of takeoff roll. So what I'll do is I'll come up here, and what have we got? We've got 108. So I'm going to set V2 plus 10, so that's that 118, and that's set there as it is at the moment. So that's all very good, isn't it? All very nice indeed. And the rad alt, we don't want the rad alt on, so let's just bring that down, turn that off. Everything else is pretty much fine, and I'm not going to set up the nav aids for the departure. So looking at where we are, where we're going to taxi, we'll have a little play with the ground handling, see what we think, and let's get out of here. So park brake, I think in the real thing it's probably one of those where you could have just pressed the pedal to disconnect it, but without having the aircraft POH in front of me, I don't know. So let's just click that. It does start to roll on residual power, and what we're going to do is go round to the left. I will say from the outset, steering on this thing is very positive. It's very nice indeed. It's got a little bit of weight to it, so it's got momentum. So if I go right, centre, you can see it's got the momentum, which is really nice. As I say, we're at Stansted, home of Ryanair, really. Although there's such an enormous airline now, they're pretty much home everywhere. But yeah, and it will hold the speed on an idle throttle unless you turn particularly tightly, at which point it will slow down. Although it's not doing that at the minute. But there we go. So ground handling is all very nice, very good with the pedals. You can make small adjustments. MFG crosswinds I've had them 10 years. I got them probably about 6 to 8 months after they came out. Replaced my Citex, and I've not missed the Citex at all. But really nice to steer on the ground. As you can hear, we're picking up a bit of speed. Can't be bothered to check either side, left and right, but there's no other aircraft out there, so we're pretty safe to do so. So I'm going to taxi to the hold, and I will see you there. Okay, so we're at the hold. We're just going to run through a couple of things whilst we're here. So the flap's set to 15, trim is set for takeoff, which is basically the same sort of thing as you'd have in a Cessna 152, 172, whatever. Thrust attenuator switch goes to auto. So here we go, this goes to auto. As I say, it's not a system I'm overly comfortable with, but that's one of those things. Ignition goes to on, so ignition is on for both, and we've got fuel pumps on for both as well. And then when cleared for position takeoff, pitot and static heat are both on. Anti-ice and de-ice systems are currently on, off. Anti-collision lights are on. Landing or recognition lights are going on, so landing lights going on. That's all good. Transponder we're not using, radar is not fitted, and annunciator panel we have checked. The only thing there is the attenuators. So just revising ourselves, 96.8 for our takeoff. 104, 105, 108. And as I say, we've got nav selected as our horizontal mode. We've got no vertical mode selected. We're going to pull up to 10 degrees nose up and then climb away from that, selecting our mode as necessary. We've got 4,000 feet set for our altitude. So we just come around and we'll just do a rolling takeoff. We might as well just get ourselves relatively central to the runway and apply some power. And try and find a centre line. There's one out there somewhere with our name on it. Looking for the power to be set. Speed's alive. Keep looking down for the speed, for the power, and then you look up, you find you're drifting. So just going to rotate gently. Come on, rotate gently. A little bit of a ground grip there. gears up. As I say, 10 degrees. Oh, I've swapped that back again inadvertently. There we go. As I say, we're going to hold 10 degrees nose up. It's a little bit bouncy with my controls. I think it must be my controls, you know. But we're on nav and FMS, so we should be able to follow the nav around. Excuse me, got a bit of a frog in my throat. Just double check that nav is set to FMS. Climbing nicely. The minimum height we wanted after our turn is 3,000. Looking to climb to 4,000. Speed's good. I will, however, just lower the nose a little bit to allow us to accelerate and actually follow the departure. Raise the flaps, that'll help us accelerate. Pitch down because of the flaps retracting, and we're accelerating nicely. And what I'll do now is I will choose indicated airspeed, which should give us the pitch and roll commands to follow to hold this this airspeed. Just trim, 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 trim. It's very nice to hand fly. Now I'm not quite sure what's just gone on. I saw the saw this flick over here, so I'm not quite sure what's gone on with the LNAV here. Oh, I know what it is. That's the extended centre line. It's just flicked that up. So I need to come around to the right, don't I? And whilst I've been looking at that, I've not been paying attention to my altitude, and I've bussed the altitude by 300 feet. Yeah, it's just drawn the departure quite strangely, which is yeah, just one of those things. Confused me a little, but we're levelling, just trying to regain 4,000. Don't want to go too fast in this turn, and then it should level the wings shortly. There we go. I will at some point get some control over my altitude. So it's flown that nicely. We're at 4,000, well, 4,040 feet. What I can do at this point is I'll just stick my autopilot in, and it can do work. It's a magic. And then we'll just let the speed build now. It's a pretty good autopilot in this thing, I'll be honest. So yeah, in terms of departure, apart from the very strange, it did a reciprocal of the centre line. So what's happened is, let's get this up. As I came round here and we started to turn in, it did a reciprocal of the centre line, and it looked really odd there. So this is to do with the setup for this. I don't really understand why it did that, but it did. So we're going to just live with it. But we managed to regather our thoughts. So let's just have a quick look. Takeoff we've done. So climb, landing gears up, flaps are up, ignition can go back to normal. We'll put the fuel pumps to normal as well. Engine sync. We've got an engine synchronizer down here. You can choose whether it's what you sync. So just listening to the noise of the aircraft. We're getting up towards 240. We'll sync the fan. In terms of our sync, got to remember to turn that off. Engine sync's on, your dampers on, passenger advisory switch. Not going to bother with. I don't care about my passengers well enough to do that. Landing or recognition lights can stay on from my perspective, and that's pretty much it. Pressurization, we're only going up to 6,000, and oxygen control valve is normal. Cabin altitude, we're ignoring that because we're not going high enough, and then altimeter set to standard, which we've got. That's going to be to do with the attenuators, because we've stowed them. Now they shouldn't come out in the air. Doesn't appear that they are. What we're now going to do is go up to initiate a climb to 6,000. So if I do 6,000 and then press indicated airspeed, it will pitch us up because we've got excess power. We'll just pop our power up a little bit more to about 95, something like that. And we should climb away nicely, and then just make sure we're set for 6,000. It should capture that nicely. So departure's busy. Apart from the kerfuffle with the nav, we didn't smash into the ground. We haven't hurt ourselves and we haven't hurt anybody else. We just need to monitor our power settings so that we don't exceed our speed. But what we're going to do whilst we do the initial part of the departure is we will actually set ourselves up for the arrival, because this is a very short flight. It's literally about 30 minutes or so. So why not take the chance to set yourself up and help yourself out? That's my attitude. So just monitoring the altitude. 500 to go. And we'll set a power for about 80 odd percent. See if 80-85% will hold us at a decent speed. Starting to level out. Bringing this, gently starting to bring some power off so we don't exceed 250 because we're below 10,000. Thing is, as I draw the power off, it gives us less thrust for the climb, so it just does slow the last bit of the climb a little bit. But we're leveling nicely at 6,000. We're at 74 and slowing down. So I'm just going to pop us up to 80, see what we get in terms of our speed at 80 odd percent. But very nice to hand fly, really lovely to hand fly. So let's get ourselves a bit of range on this. We don't need quite that much, but we've got over 20 miles. So let's have a look at our arrival for what we're going to set and just bring it over here. So we're actually going to be coming almost straight in, so we need 110.75. We will set a secondary or a backup with 113.35, and that should be pretty much it. And then in terms of everything else we need, the missed approach is straight ahead 3,000 feet. The MSA around us is 2,300, which is important because if you look at this, our platform altitude's only 1,800 feet, which is pretty low. But what we can do is start to set some stuff up. So what did we say? 110.75. Flew into Southampton previously, 113.35. So we've actually got it set up already, which is nice. Was there an ADF? I don't know if there was an ADF, just looking at the chart on the other side. No, there's no ADF that I can see. So what we can also do though is we can set ourselves a radalt warning of 200 feet, ready for the descent. And our speed, yeah, it's just at 250. So what are we holding that at? 79.7. So note to self for future. I double checked this with the manual as well. It says pull and hold, but it doesn't seem to be doing anything. It's I don't know. My headset's just beeping at me to tell me it needs a charge, so excuse the kerfuffle. And 3, 2, 1 back in the room. So yeah, very nice. Let's just get our map to where we want it. We're approaching silver, 20 odd miles to go, so it also gives us the opportunity to do the following. The heading at the moment is at 0, so we want to bring it around to the left. Heading, because I want to just check the course that's set up. So what we'll do is bring this round. We'll just set this onto heading momentarily. We'll set our nav source to nav. We will change the mode to this. We'll make sure we set up 199. Yeah, we're set up 199 there, so that's all good. So in that mode, what I can do is I will put the nav 1 on, so we'll get an indication when we get towards our ILS. just to have a needle on, and then I'm just going to take this, I'm going to go back to FMS, change my screen back to what I was getting. Well, that's not what I want to do, that's what I want to do, and then changes back to nav, and that'll go back to FMS as our nav source. Happy days! So yeah, what I'm going to do is I am going to float along in our lovely air just above the beautiful English countryside, and I'll see you as we get to the top of descent. In fact, what we'll do is we will have a look at our descent planning, because we've got a little bit of time now. We might as well enjoy ourselves. So the VNAV, as I say, is something that is advisory, but you can use it as a tool in terms of where you want to be. So let's get to our VNAV profile, and let's get the charts up on the other page and bring those across. So as I say, platform altitude's 1800, but that's only at 5.2 miles. But I could do with being down just a little bit before that. So the final fix for 20 is at 1800 feet, which is fine. The centre fix it's got at nearly 1500 feet higher, and there's only 2 miles. So 2 miles is not going to take us long. It's going to take probably well, it's going to take us 2 miles. We'll be doing about 120 knots, so it's got 1 minute really between the centre fix and the final fix. So what I'm actually going to do, on the basis that these are only 2 miles apart, I'm actually going to set the centre fix to 1800 feet as well. So flight plan, next, centre fix here, I'm going to set that to 2000, 2, 1, 2, 3, in fact no, so we're going to do 1800, aren't we? 1800. So it's only, as I say, it's only 2 miles between the two. It's not like we're going to be trudging for 20 miles at 1800 feet. So there we go, that's that in for the centre fix. What I then need to do is look at the VNAV, and from present position to centre fix at 1800 feet is currently 53.7 miles. What I can do is this down here, which is V2, which is VNAV 2, so click that and come up with a list of points. I want to go to the centre fix, enter, and I want it, so it's still 53 odd miles away, but it's now working out the vertical deviation and the target vertical speed, etc. And I'm going to want a target vertical speed of about 2000 feet a minute. Click enter, and that now tells us top of descent is 40.8 miles, although it's calculated a angle of descent of 4.13 degrees, but we can update that as we get closer. But this is giving us a top of descent, which is all rather good. And if you notice, it's 10 miles short of the total distance from present position, which makes sense. I mean, 10 miles is quite a long run in, so looking at the chart, the initial approach fix, the final approach fix is at 5.2, and then the initial approach fix is 7.2, which is 9.2, so it's not too dissimilar, so we can cope with that. That's not too much of a problem at all. But what I can do now, just go back to flight plan. Now, whether or not it shows us the top of descent on the actual gubbins here, I cannot remember. Let's have a look. Zoom out, range, map range. Will it show us the top of descent? I don't think it does. There's nothing there for a top of descent, is there? That's just a limitation of the map of the system. Not a problem, we can work that out ourselves, but as I say, the system's not set up for coupled VNAV, so we're going to have to go back to our basic instruments anyway at that point. So what I'll do now is I'll continue flying, and you can rejoin me just before we get to the top of descent. So I'm just going to mention this, as we're cruising close to our top of descent, you can see we're only 16 miles away. I'm pretty sure that in the real thing you can obviously target a vertical speed, but I'm pretty sure you could also set a angle of descent, so you could set 3-degree angle of descent. I'm not quite sure, my memory's a bit rusty, but that's something I used to be able to do in the Majestic -8 Q400. But obviously for this, it's not so much of a problem because we've not got a coupled descent profile with the VNAV. We're just using it as more as a calculator than anything else, so that we can make sure our top of descent is at an appropriate position. But yeah, it's going to be pretty good in terms of there or thereabouts. What I've noticed is it does tend to drift from your selected speed, so I'll just update that to 2000, and we can monitor it as we go down. There we go. So only 12 miles to go. So yeah, in terms of the navigation equipment, it's relatively basic stuff. There's no sort of real fancy FMS to muck around with. It is literally down to being able to utilise the systems that are within the aircraft, which is fantastic from my perspective. It's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I've got absolutely no qualms about that. As I say, I've set nav 1 for a needle. The needle, I don't know if it shows on this display, but it will give us some orientation when we're manually vectoring ourselves for the final approach, which is imminent. Look at this. We're getting there. We're getting there. It's not too far away. Top of descent, and we get a message to say top of descent alert. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start our descent. We're going down to 1800. That's the Barrow, Ricardo. You've done that before. 1800. And we're on an ICAO standard day for the weather, so we know that that's the Barrow reference. And 6.5 miles to go. So we will do vertical speed at this point. Come over here, and I've noticed that in the aircraft this spins. In this panel it doesn't, but we will go down at 2,000 feet a minute, bring the power off so that we don't overspeed, but we'll try and maintain the same speed initially, just so that our calculations work out, because obviously in terms of the calculations, yes, it does the vertical speed, but the distance you cover depends on both your vertical speed and your airspeed, and it's calculated that we needed X amount of distance, so it's important to try and make sure that you maintain a speed that's appropriate to your descent. If I now go too slow, we'll still be descending at 2,000 feet a minute, but we'll end up levelling out short of where we want to be. So that calculation on here is based on your speed. Obviously it's also based on, so you can see the top of descent has actually moved away from us slightly, but from present position it's 11 miles to go, 11.6. So I'm anticipating we're going to get down slightly early, but that's not so much of a problem. We are going down pretty damn quick though, aren't we? So let's just take some of that vertical speed off to 1,500 feet a minute. It's a pretty misty day. Well, not misty, it's a bit of sort of low-level horribleness there. Now, judging by this, we are well low, but what I can do now is I can come down here and I can look at, because we're going to stick in this mode, but what I'll do is I'll bring us across to where have we gone? Here we go. Bush, that's what we want. We're not picking up the ILS on nav1 yet, which is not so much of an issue, but what we do want to do is make sure our heading is where we want to go. So let's bring that round here. I'm just going to stick it out slightly to the left a few degrees, just so that we know that we're going to intercept, and we're going to go on to heading. So we're on heading mode, just watching our altitude, coming down to 1800 and steady. And we're going to have to reintroduce some power because the altitude we're leveled, so now 11075, just double checking. And having a look on the chart just quickly, 11075. Oh, we've got a reading now, so round to the right. Set ourselves on an intercept. And then we'll click ourselves across to nav, and we will be able to select approach because we're in nav mode. Get my feet on the pedals. Don't think we've got nav signal, ILS signals yet, but we will. How far have we got? Well, we're still on FMS here. We want to get off FMS, really, don't we? We want nav down here. That's what we want. That's why. Oh, pay attention to speed. Trying to figure out my nav stuff and wasn't paying attention enough to speed. Thanks for the warning. Nav is coming in. We're below glide slopes. That's all good and dandy. .5 miles. I think we'll take it as manual now, says he, with an air of stupidity. Make sure it's doing what it's doing. Glide slopes twitching, that's coming in, so let's do the approach. Let's try and fly a semi-decent approach. Just check. Gears coming down. And make sure we've got the final flap. Bit of a bounce. Whoa! You forget how sensitive these controls are. Or at least I do for my joystick. A bit bouncy, there we go. Slightly below glide slope. That'll be for the thrust attenuators. We need to make sure that they're in. They're ready to go. I'm trying to do this heads down so that we can assess the handling characteristics of the aircraft. So we're slightly high, correcting, and we're pretty much on centre line. Bit of trim because we are remaining slightly high. We're not following the crosshairs accurately enough. We're going high, so let's just correct for that. And obviously we're going to go down, but at some point it's going to intercept. Come on, you know you want to go down. Try and get that glide slope back in. Looking for rad alt of 200. There we go, it's coming back now. Too fast, bit of power off. Although bringing the nose back up to follow our glide slope will slow us down inevitably. Where are we at? 3 miles, 3.3 miles. Watching the glide slope. Need to correct quicker than that. Just try and catch it before it gets to half deflection, which would have failed us on an instrument landing, in an instrument rating. There we go, caught it back a little bit. Come on, get down. Get down. 750. Get down. Need to re-establish our rate of descent. We're looking at about 500 feet a minute. Any higher and we're going to plough into the ground. Rad alt's showing 750. And a bit too high. What's the rate of descent? As it's over 600, it's going to come back in quite quickly. Watch the speed. Watch the glide path. trimming. Red alt's coming in, 350, so we're going to be looking up any minute now. Going low. Bring it back in. And looking out. That'll do me. Watch the trim. And I always bounce this thing. Always bounce it. Why is it harder to stay on centerline when I'm near the ground? It always is for me. I don't understand why. That's a human thing for me. Now, it does feel like you're sitting quite low when you land this thing. Whee! PIO. That's a bit of a thud. But I'll take it. We're going to walk away. And we're just going to roll out. And so we've survived that one. Although then we smash into things whilst we're steering. Well, it wasn't my best landing, but we're down in one piece. Thoroughly enjoyable, having said that. And just because it's not your best landing doesn't mean you don't enjoy it. And what we'll do is we'll go to parking, and then we'll have a look at doing a summary of what we think about this little beastie. Whilst we're motoring along and I'm talking, I'm forgetting to do things like muck around with lights. We'll bring ourselves around here. Taxiing along quite merrily at a very breakneck rate of knots. We'll bring ourselves into the next section here of GA. Bring ourselves round, and hopefully we won't embarrass ourselves with our parking. We'll just drive straight over the truck because it's X-plane. We don't have any crash with trucks, which is great because there's nothing worse than having things interact with your aircraft and cause you to crash and die. But we'll bring it in nice and close to this Beechcraft. We'll see if we can spin it around. If we can't, we'll just drive straight through the middle of the hangar. A little bit of left-hand engine. There we go. We'll put the control lock on, parking brake on, and then we can start to turn things off. So taxi light, that comes off, that comes off. I should have put the ignition on and I should have put the fuel boost on, but I didn't, so I'm a very bad boy. Slap on the back of the wrist. That can come off, that can go off, that can go off, 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 off. Make sure all that's off. We'll leave the passengers strapped in, don't need to worry about them. They are of no concern to me. Anti-skid, will leave all that on. All of that can stay on. And so we'll just bring our throttles back, shut down, avionics off, and then make sure everything else is as we want it before we leave. That can go off, that can go off, that can go off. Anything else that needs to go off? I do not think so. So that can go off, that can go off, and finally that can go off. So let's have a bit of a summary about what we think about this beast of a bird. So let's summarise it in sections then, really. The first thing is the externals. What does she look like? Absolutely glorious. Virtually nothing that I could pick up on it apart from a little bit of straight lining where the wing joins the wing fairing joins the fuselage. I really couldn't pick much up at all. In fact, what we will do is while we're here and talking, we'll put some covers on. Where's the cover up here? This is the one I struggle with, isn't it? We'll put some covers on, look after our little baby. Chocks. This interactive part, for me, I really enjoy this. I don't normally on most aircraft, but I do on this one. There's a little bit of aircraft husbandry going on here, which I really do like. So yeah, obviously the engines would be hot, so we wouldn't be doing this in real life, but this is Simland, so I can do it without burning my hands. So the externals are really, really nice. The interactive elements of the externals are superb. They look very good. Noises and sounds are very good. When we then look into the cockpit is very well modelled. There's only a couple of minor things that aren't modelled in terms of clickability, one of which is the radar, which, as we've discussed, is potentially a third-party thing as opposed to a Torquesim thing. The flight management system, again, it's third party brought in. It's been done very well. The fact that I got confused when it drew the extended reciprocal of the centerline just threw me a little bit for a moment there, but actually the functionality of the cockpit is pretty much literally there's only a couple of things that I could find that don't work. In terms of the modelling, shaping, texturing, it's all good. The cabin is lovely. As I say, not a place I spend a great deal of time, but I know that some people do. A lot of smooth animations in there, such as the window blinds, etc. Things like the door, lovely. You know, the animation and the elements to do with the door, all very nice. Systems and instrumentation. It's a relatively simple aircraft, although it's pressurised. It's got a very simple pressurisation system, and it doesn't have hydraulics. It does have obviously quite a complex electrical system as a result, with starter generators and all that kind of thing. The only feedback that I would look at in terms of that is that I think the schematics of the electrical system, if it was reactive in terms of colour, not just in terms of the numbers but in terms of colour, that would be a nice touch, because then you'd be able to see what's powering what. However, the inclusion of circuit breakers is great. What this would really benefit from with the inclusion of circuit breakers is, although the circuit breakers are functional, which is great, actually it's crying out for something to require you to use the circuit breakers, i.e. some sort of because it has persistent modelling. When I load this up next time, it will be exactly as I've left it, so some sort of failure modelling in it would be nice to make use of all that hard work they put into making sure that things like circuit breakers, etc. work. So the interior in terms of modelling and systems got no issues with at all. I think it's really, really good. When we get onto the flight handling, for me, she's quite twitchy. That may be a control thing, but she does handle beautifully. The auto flight systems work well for me. Obviously, there's over the past couple of iterations been a lot of feedback from the community where they've made adjustments for bugs, etc. But I found it to be pretty decent overall. So, you know, then we get back to the final couple of things. Documentation is pretty good. It's very attractive. It's very well laid out. What I would say is that there's not much in terms of handling notes, in terms of how to fly the thing. There's performance charts that you can get access to by digging into the forum, but ideally that should be available at the front end of the sim, rather than having to go, you know, through a couple of menu pages to find it. It should be with the other documentation if it's going to be used at all. But as I say, the documentation otherwise is pretty good. It would just be nice to have either a tutorial or some handling notes or stuff like that, which you can do slow time. So not necessarily just following YouTube videos, but maybe having something slow time. I'm a fan of having tutorial flights, for example, where you can basically follow the tutorial flight, but that's a personal thing. And then the final thing really is cost. $85. I'm conscious it's not a cheap add-on. You know, it's not the most expensive, but it's also not cheap. But then, as I say at the start of the video, what we then have to do is we have to make sure we don't just have a nominal figure that is not assessed against anything. We need to actually look at the product, and this is a very high quality product. There's no two ways about it. You guys will have seen from the flight and you know what we've been through, there's a lot to this aircraft. They've put a lot of time and effort into it, and I think the price tag is justified. We'd all like things cheaper, you know, that's the nature of humans. We all want things cheaper, but my key is, are we getting what we pay for? And I think we are here. I think it's a justified price tag. for what it is. It's a very highly detailed rendition of an aircraft that I hadn't really flown anything of previously. And as I say, the handling is, I've not flown one of these, and I doubt very many people have, but the handling seems realistic. You know, it's got the pitch power couple that comes in with the engine used to the power. The flaps do cause you to balloon, which, you know, for the size of aircraft I think would be appropriate. Yeah, it's just a lovely little thing. So if you enjoyed the video, guys, please don't forget to tick like, share, subscribe. Particularly sharing and subscribing helps me out massively, but also more importantly, it gives me some idea as to what you guys enjoy and what you guys want to see in future. If you have any suggestions, please feel free to stick a comment as to anything that you think would be appropriate for me to have a look at, and I will endeavour to do so, providing I can get it. But in the meantime, guys, take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care.